the historic battle that shaped France's destiny. Welcome back to our channel. Today we're taking you back in time to the year 1453 to witness a battle that would forever shape the destiny of France. Summary: the Battle of Castillon, fought on July 17, 1453, was the last battle of the 100 Years' War. It pitted the English army on one side against the Franco-Breton army on the other. It was also the first documented battle in which artillery proved to be the decisive factor. After the reconquest of Normandy in 1450, Charles VII of France sent Lieutenant General Dunois to reconquer Guyana. The soldier assembled a large army and achieved, in 1451, the objective he had been ordered to accomplish. The English relied for the defense of that city on the loyalty of thousands of Gascons, who had always collaborated in the defense of the captured territories against the attempts of the French to reconquer them. The English had few troops of their own in the region, and the pro-English Gascons faced serious problems due to the constant and determined French attacks. Thus it was that Dunois regained Guyana in a surprisingly short time. The rapid campaign of reconquest culminated on June 30, 1451, when the French entered the Gascon capital of Bordeaux victorious. The English star in the conflict seemed about to fade, and the protracted 100 Years' War was drawing to a close. However, after 300 years of English domination, the inhabitants of the city now considered themselves, and in fact were, English. Consequently, they sent an embassy to England and demanded that King Henry VI reconquer the city. They were dissatisfied because the new French overlords intended to regulate trade and levy unusually high taxes to finance the war effort. The monarch agreed and sent John Talbot, Earl of Shrewsbury, to organize a military force, sail to France, and fulfill the wishes of the pro-English population of the Bordeaux region. The English commander was over 70 years old, but a tough and competent veteran. Also read Battles Stephen the Great, Landing and Capture. On October 17, 1452, Talbot landed near Bordeaux, commanding a force of over 3,000 men-at-arms and a group of experienced archers. Seeing the English force approaching, the inhabitants mutinied against the French garrison defending the city and forcibly expelled them, then opened the gates of the wall to their compatriots. The Gascon fraction of the population followed the example of the others and welcomed the invading army. Most of the villages around Guyana did the same. The supposedly easy French reconquest threatened to be complicated by a serious error of strategic information. Charles VII had believed that Talbot was on his way to capture Normandy. Instead, the English had appeared at Bordeaux. Throughout the winter, Charles VII of France decided to act. He gathered his armies and prepared them for a punitive campaign to recapture Bordeaux. When spring arrived, Charles advanced towards the city, dividing his force into 3 separate corps that made the approach march from 3 different directions, from the northeast, east, and southeast. The king himself commanded the rear reserve. Also read Battles Joseph Cornell, Reinforcements and Change of Plans. Faced with the serious problem posed by the enemy army that stalked him, Talbot asked for and obtained reinforcements. He was given another 3,000 men under the command of his son, the Lord of Lisle, which, however, were still insufficient to deal with the thousands and thousands of Frenchmen crouching on the borders of Gascony. Many Gascons, perhaps as many as 3,000, also joined Talbot. John Bureau, head of the Gallic army, ordered his eastern army to lay siege to the nearby town of Castillon, today Castillon-la-Bataille, on the banks of the Dordogne River, forcing Talbot to abandon his original plan, which was to entrench himself in Bordeaux and resist a siege there. Faced with the news, the English commander had to leave the city and go to Castillon to try to lift the siege. Also read Battles Korean War. Battle. Along with the morale boost of victory at the Priory, Talbot also pushed forward because of reports that the French were retreating. However, the cloud of dust leaving the camp, which the townsmen indicated as a retreat, was in fact created by camp followers departing before the battle. The English advanced but soon ran into the full force of the French army. Despite being outnumbered and in a vulnerable position, Talbot ordered his men to continue fighting. Historian A.J. Pollard suggests this seemingly reckless behavior from Talbot may be due to the fact that his pride and honor were at stake, for he had already ordered his men to battle when he discovered the strength of the French position. The only Englishman who remained mounted in the battle, he also did not wear armor due to previous agreements with the French when he was released from captivity in Normandy. According to David Nicole, the battle itself was highly characteristic of the period, with the strong field fortification of the French and the small arms fighting of the battle. In many ways, this battle played out like the Battle of Crécy in reverse. The French guns obliterated the advancing soldiers, with each shot reportedly killing 6 men at a time. Talbot's reinforcements continued to arrive at the battle, only to suffer the same fate in their turn. Despite the odds against the English, the battle lasted over an hour until a 1,000-strong Breton cavalry force led by Peter II, Duke of Brittany, crashed into their right flank, sending them into retreat. The battle ended in an English rout, and both Talbot and his son were killed. There is some debate over the circumstances of Talbot's death, but it appears that his horse was killed by a cannon shot, and its mass pinning him down. A French archer in turn killed him with an axe. Aftermath: the Anglo-Gascon force which had not participated in the battle, along with the survivors of the rout, totaling up to 5,000 men, including John de Foix, 1st Earl of Kendal, sought refuge in the castle of Castillon. The day after the battle, Jean Bureau besieged the castle with his artillery, and the defenders surrendered on July 19th, becoming prisoners of war. With Talbot's death and the destruction of his army, English authority in Gascony eroded, and the French retook Bordeaux on 19th October. It was not apparent to either side that the period of conflict was over. In hindsight, the battle marks a decisive turning point in history, and is cited as the end point of the period known as the 100 Years' War. This was a major European battle won through the extensive use of field artillery. Henry VI of England lost his mental capacity in late 1453, which led to the outbreak of the Wars of the Roses in England. Some have speculated that learning of the defeat at Castillon led to his mental collapse. The English crown lost all its continental possessions except for the Pale of Calais, which was the last English possession in mainland France, and the Channel Islands, historically part of the Duchy of Normandy and thus of the Kingdom of France. Calais was lost in 1558. The Channel Islands have remained British Crown dependencies to the present day, except for their German occupation during World War II. A casualty after the Battle of Castillon was Pierre II de Montferrand, husband of Mary Plantagenet, illegitimate daughter of the Duke of Bedford, and a granddaughter of Henry IV of England. While returning to France after being exiled in England, Montferrand was arrested and taken to Poitiers, where he was tried by a commission. Having been found guilty, he was beheaded and quartered, possibly on the orders of Charles VII, at Poitiers in July 1454. Montferrand was one of only a few nobles known to have been executed for treason during the reign of Charles VII. Battle. While the victory at the monastery boosted morale, Talbot also advanced on reports that the French were retreating. However, the cloud of dust emanating from the camp, which the townsfolk indicated as retreating, was actually created by the camp's followers, who left before the battle. The British advanced, but were soon met by the entire French force. Despite being outnumbered and in a weak position, Talbot ordered his men to continue the fight. Historian A.J. Pollard attributed Talbot's seemingly reckless action to the fact that his pride and honor were at stake, as he had already ordered his men into battle when he learned of the strength of the French position. It is suggested that it may be due to the only Englishman left on horseback from the battle. He was not wearing armor when he was released from captivity in Normandy, by prior agreement with France. According to David Nicole, the battle itself was very characteristic of its time. Powerful field fortifications and small arms battles of the French army. In many ways, this battle played out like the reverse of the Battle of Crécy. The French artillery annihilated the advancing soldiers, reportedly killing 6 at a time with each shot. Talbot's reinforcements continued to arrive at the battle, only to suffer the same fate this time. Despite the odds against the English, the battle lasted over an hour until 1,000-strong Brittany cavalry under Peter II of Brittany slammed into the British right flank and forced the British to retreat. The battle ended with the British rout. Both Talbot and his son were killed. The circumstances of Talbot's death are disputed, but it is believed that his horse was shot down by a cannon, the impact of which pinned him down, and a French archer killed him with an axe. First phase. Convinced that he must leave Bordeaux to help defend Castillon, Talbot once again displayed his well-known aggressiveness and swiftness of decision. He left the city in the early morning of July 16th, leading an advanced force of horsemen, followed by a large mass of men-at-arms on foot. With the latter group moved his artillery. His total forces on leaving Bordeaux consisted of approximately 6,000 English troops supported by the aforementioned 3,000 Gascons. Arriving at Libourne, a town on the banks of the Dordogne at nightfall, Talbot's advance party, consisting of 500 mounted men-at-arms and 800 archers on foot, continued forward on a forced march by night, crossing Saint-Emilion and approaching the French camp. Talbot arrived near the enemy camp at dawn the next day, July 17, 1453. He discovered Rouault's force, which had abandoned the priory, hiding in a wood north of St. Lawrence and opposite the French camp, and engaged it in a lightning skirmish that surprised it and culminated in numerous French dead. The survivors fled through the woods and took refuge in Bureau's camp. This favorable action bolstered the morale of the English troops. After a forced march of more than 50 kilometers, it was imperative to give his men time for rest and food. While the soldiers were sleeping or eating breakfast, a messenger who had managed to escape from the city informed Talbot that the French army had taken to flight, and that hundreds of horsemen were abandoning the fortifications and fleeing. Looking into the distance, the English commander could see a huge cloud of dust dispersing on the horizon. Second phase. The British horsemen forded the Lidoire about 600 meters west of the French camp. The Anglo-German forces did not advance against the enemy directly from the west, but surrounded the camp with intentions of attacking the longer axis of the camp, concentrating on the banks above the river on the south side. Discovering to his surprise that the parapets were defended by thousands of archers armed to the teeth and over 300 guns, Talbot began to think he may have underestimated the French defenses, but without losing his cool, he ordered to attack with ferocity. The French artillerymen were expecting just that. The Englishman had his men dismount and storm the defenses to the cry of, "By Talbot, by St. George!" The French cannons opened fire. The slaughter was appalling, yet many Englishmen and Gascons managed to reach the palisade and climb over the parapet. One Englishman, Thomas Everingham, was even able to plant his flag on the wall, paying for his feat with his life. While the guns swept the English with enfilade fire, in various parts of the front, the fighting degenerated into hand-to-hand combat. At this point, the main English force arrived on the battlefield, these being a total of 4,000 men, a figure completely insufficient in the face of the number of French. The French field defense could handle them perfectly well, especially since the English artillery had lagged behind and never managed to reach the battlefield. Although the fire was deadly, the British managed to fight for almost an hour or so until noon. At that point, Talbot noticed that his infantrymen were beginning to fall back. What was happening was that a large cavalry force sent by the Duke of Brittany was approaching from the right flank, although some later historians claim it was from the left flank. The French archers, who had taken refuge behind the palisade after having been defeated in the forest early in the morning, now came out and launched a cloud of arrows against the English, who were forced to fight on two fronts. They were trapped between the French in front and the Bretons on the flank. Also read, Battle of Antietam. The disaster. Caught between two large enemy forces, the English had to open up and retreat, being immediately pursued by the main Bureau force. In rapid retreat, they forded the Dordogne at Pas de Rozan, at which point Talbot's horse was shot and killed, an episode captured by the painter Lariviere in the painting illustrating this article, although Talbot was not wearing armor that day and his horse was white, trapping the commander under his corpse. In these circumstances, his coat of arms was recognized by a French soldier named Michel Perounen, who, attacking him with his battle axe, killed him instantly. Talbot's son also perished trying to defend his father. The rest of the fleeing Anglo-Gascon army was killed or captured by the pursuing troops. The defeat of Talbot left the entire area of Guyana without a single English army capable of defending it. The Gascon cities surrendered one after another to the French artillery, and when Bordeaux again capitulated to Charles VII, the military part of the 100 Years' War was in fact over. The Battle of Castillon represents, therefore, the last act of arms of the war, and the first in European history in which cannons decided the fate of a battle and of a war. In that same year, King Henry VI of England began to show clear signs of dementia, which precipitated the outbreak of the English Civil War known as the War of the Two Roses. Faced with this grave circumstance, the English had to withdraw their troops stationed in France and renounce all their territorial claims on the continent, as well as their claims to the French throne. All their possessions were taken from them in a few months, except Calais. Aftermath. The Anglo-Gascon forces who did not participate in the battle took refuge in Castillon with 5,000 survivors of the rout, including John de Foix, 1st Earl of Kendal. The day after the battle, Jean Bureau besieged the castle with artillery, and the defenders surrendered and were taken prisoner on 19 July. With Talbot's death and the destruction of the army, British authority in Gascony was eroded, and the French recaptured Bordeaux on the 19th October. It was not clear to either side that the conflict period was over. In retrospect, this battle marked a decisive turning point in history, and is cited as the end of the era known as the 100 Years' War. This was a major European battle won by the extensive use of field artillery. Henry VI of England lost his mental faculties at the end of 1453, leading to the outbreak of the Wars of the Roses in England. Some have speculated that learning about the loss at Castillon was a mental breakdown. The British royal family retains all continental possessions, with the exception of the Pale Isle of Calais, the last British possession in mainland France, and the Channel Islands, which were historically part of the Duchy of Normandy and part of the Kingdom of France. Lost everything. Calais was lost in 1558. Except for German occupation during World War II, the Channel Islands have remained a British crown dependency to this day. The victim after the Battle of Castillon was Pierre II de Montferrand, husband of Mary Plantagenet, the illegitimate daughter of the Duke of Bedford, and granddaughter of King Henry IV of England. After exile in England, Montferrand was arrested on his way back to France and taken to Poitiers, where he was tried by a commission. Convicted, he was beheaded and quartered at Poitiers in July 1454, probably by order of Charles VII. Montferrand was one of the few nobles known to have been executed for treason during the reign of Charles VII. Thanks for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed this journey into the past. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more fascinating historical insights.